Congressman, thanks for making this forum available. You know me, and, and it was good to see you down in Old Saybrook the other day, and Jerri from Essex. And you've got to be completely well aware of the ratcheted rhetoric and inflammatory statements that have been flung at Tea Partiers. I am a Tea Party patriot.
Good for you.
I've got to believe that you are not threatened by my thank you. And it's good to see there are 2 rows of really big burly guys in the front 2 rows this time, so thanks for getting over that. Will you, and this is a yes or no question, will you here and now take a stand and go on the record reflecting the rhetoric, the impact of the rhetoric on the discourse? Will you denounce the rhetoric that has come from the Congressional Black Caucus, and most recently from Jimmy Hoffa? Will you denounce that right here, right now? We are not going to hurt you. We may attack your policies. We're not going to hurt you.
Well, I mean, I'm not somebody who ever uses that rhetoric, and frankly, I'm not into denouncing either. I mean, I frankly think if we're serious about trying to have real dialogue like we're having right now, that we should do it by our own example. And I think anybody who knows me, that's just the way I interact with people. And you know, I grew up in a Republican household, as many of you know, so I don't think Republicans bite. You know, I know they're good people, and they care about our country, and that's just, you know, what I will say to you is, in terms of my own personal interaction, that's just not the way I'm going to behave as someone who has the privilege to represent this district.
But if you let that rhetoric go unaddressed, it comes off as either supporting it or at least not objecting to it.
You know what, I mean, just sort of going down that rabbit hole is something that I just feel is just sort of non-productive. I mean, the best way to get this country sort of feeling better about discourse and politics, in my opinion, is getting things done. And that's where I'm going back to life.
Hello, Representative Courtney and Sean Kelly from Ellington. I just wanted to make one quick point about the tax cuts that you referenced earlier as one of the 3 components that led to the budget deficit we find ourselves in. I would like to point out that when the tax cuts did go into effect, the government revenues increased by 40%. So I don't think tax cuts necessarily contributed to the deficit that we find ourselves in now. What I would like to address is specifically here in Connecticut, but kind of overall, the job situation or the challenges. I'm in industrial sales. I call on manufacturers all over the state of Connecticut and Western Massachusetts. I'm kind of uniquely tuned into manufacturing specifically. One component of the challenge a lot of companies find these days in this economy is finding skilled workers. But especially in the Northeast, regulation, energy costs, taxes, both at the federal and the state level, 35% corporate tax rate, and corporate tax burdens specifically in Connecticut are driving jobs out of the state. I know I've worked in places where companies have left the state of Connecticut and moved south, either in the U.S. or south of the border into Mexico, because they can't compete in this country anymore. And if you take a look at New England specifically, to try to find what works, there is a state that is actually doing pretty well in this economy. It's got the lowest unemployment in New England by a couple of points. It has no income tax. It has the most business-friendly regulations out there, and that's New Hampshire. And they're growing. We're not.
Yes, sir.
We created 80,000 jobs between 91 and 2011. In 20 years, we created 80,000 jobs since the income tax was passed. In the 10 years prior to that, we created 200,000 jobs, and the population has essentially remained flat. What can we do?
Well, I mean, first of all, representing Eastern Connecticut, we had sort of an interesting event that took place in January where Pfizer, which is one of the largest employers in our area, announced that they're, again, reducing their workforce. These are high-value research jobs that people buy good houses, they get very involved in the school systems down there, whether it's in East Lyme or Stonington or wherever, and they're moving them out of Connecticut. So you think, all right, well, the narrative is always they're chasing a different business climate with lower taxes and less regulation. In fact, where they're going is Boston, Massachusetts, and Cambridge, because there is a synergy up there in terms of research universities and support for biotech in that state, which was frankly a lot better than it is here in the state of Connecticut. And what I would say to you, Sean, is that yes, Connecticut has been ridiculously complacent in terms of recognizing that we live in a competitive world out there, and I've seen it on my trade missions, where there's no public official in Connecticut that has organized trade missions from the state of Connecticut with small businesses trying to create new opportunities for them than the guy you're looking at right here. The last person who did it was John Rowland, actually, in the 1990s, and good for him, because it's a good thing to do in terms of trying to help companies find new markets. And South Carolina, California, Illinois, they are over in those countries creating opportunities for their companies, and Connecticut has just been sort of asleep at the wheel. And to the extent that there are ways that we can make the state a better place in terms of competitive, obviously that's the kind of approach we've got to do as a state. And that's what I would just say to you. And, the good news is Governor Malloy was down in Groton, the week of that announcement, and with his new commissioner of economic development, basically saying, we are not going to just sort of sleepwalk when other states are eating our lunch and other parts of the world are eating our lunch. And hopefully that's going to be something we're going to see real action.
Well, that's contradictory to what he said earlier when he said low precision manufacturing is not what you come to Connecticut for. You come here to buy your jet airplanes and your submarines. When Electric Boat is moving more work over to Quonset Point because it's easier and more cost competitive for them to do it. The Pratt Whitney is moving a lot of their jobs out of state, down south as well.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Congressman Courtney. Thank you for coming.